Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me from Google Cloud Platform. A little louder today, hopefully it's going to be okay. People walking around, but I still have a fancy background here at the Golf Club, and I want to talk a little bit more what happened at the keynote today on day 2 before I come to my overall takeaways. So thank you for watching, and as usual, I hope that the audio is going to be good and okay. So before that, one key observation which I cut short yesterday was that really with Eric Schmidt talking to addressing the audience, he said one key thing is that he said we have to meet you where you are, you being the developer, you being the enterprise, which is a key difference to what Google has been doing before, where it was much more about here's our way how to do things and build things. We'll have to see now what Schmidt's announcement means going forward and where that's going to lead in terms of like making it a more enterprise-friendly offering. But I think that's a key statement he made. So back to today then. Dim McKeely, sorry I watched his name in my Twitter story, started off, did a great job walking through the program, and there was 3 major things. What was explained, it was no marketing today, it was all about engineers today, so that's a very good thing to do. Some of our colleagues even said, hey, we should have had this keynote yesterday. So Joe Carver started on data centers, which to my knowledge was the biggest insight that Google has given, at least to a public, large audience, into the data center structure. So to a certain point was still the high level again, but he talked about the key aspects of how Google builds data center, starting of course with security, with physical and virtual security, no surprise really there. The high focus on Google's side, on the performance side, with building its own proprietary designs, built for Google services, and with that for significant scale, reduced vulnerability, more flexible, adaptive offering, and very efficient scalability. Of course, a mention of the new 48-volt power distribution, so no surprise in that either. Ownership is a key point, and I think Carver is up to a true differentiator here. Many other vendors there have other people running their clouds, not so much the other big guys, but other ones hand them over. Carver made the point that Google runs the whole operations by themselves, their own Googlers, so their own employees, so nobody else doing that, right? So monitoring systems, another key differentiator that Carver found around looking what's happening on the mechanical side in data center, what's happening on the security side, what's happening on the chips and the electricity side, and building their own monitoring system, and then eating. Good to see that Google eats their own dog food or drinks their own champagne using the new machine learning courses. And the key thing is, this is the overall DNA thing. You know, if you listen to me more often, I'm a strong fan of corporate DNA, meaning what really a vendor does and provides. And Google's corporate DNA is really to scale through software. Most prominently, the example always there is how software is checking that a submission to the Google App Play Store on Android is scalable and can be released with no issues. And the interesting thing that Carver shared more closer to Google Cloud Platform is that human error is still predominant in running large-scale IT operations like data centers, whereas Google's data center operations over a 2-year period were in a much lower time frame because of that software-first, automation-first arguments. Humans make mistakes, they sleep, they cost something, they're human after all. Software doesn't do that once it catches and does the right things for the right use case scenario. So the qualities are basically for data centers: availability, security, mentioned that, high performance, the culture of Google running them. And then one area which I think is remarkable too, Google on the sustainability side is the only platform provider, cloud platform provider, who's 100% sustainable. They may not get enough love from other analyst colleagues on that, so certainly something which is important going forward. And Google is, which Carver shared, also the largest private investor in the world in renewables. This is how Google runs it. So interesting to see that. And another thing he shared in more detail is about how Google does the most important thing on data centers, which is around cooling. So definitely a good deep dive into how data center operations works. He also shared insights from the Iowa data center. Google claims it's the largest data center in the world. It certainly looked like that when you saw the comparison to a truck running on that data center picture, showing the overall infrastructure there. So definitely the interesting part. The key announcement on the data center side is really what was mentioned yesterday already, the addition of Tokyo and Oregon. location and 10 more locations, which is ambitious because Google barely has 10 now. So basically doubling of data center locations in 2017. Data center locations matter, as if you follow me, have seen very much, matters for two main reasons. From a compliance perspective, on statutory side, data has to be in place. We all know the story about the broken safe harbor appointment. We don't know what the replacement for that will be. Google needs effectively more inside of the EU data centers to counter that. No question on that. The second aspect is data latency. Anybody who accesses information in the southern hemisphere from a server in the northern hemisphere knows that the speed of light becomes relatively slow, even from that perspective. So it's important to have them from a pure performance perspective. 10 significant doubling will be interesting. No location shared, lots of speculation in the logs for Twitter sphere where they could be. We'll see that. Next big topic in the queue was security. Normally something which I'm not that big of a fan of or not that interesting, but of course it matters. The biggest concern, number one concern, remains of CIOs when they put the data into the cloud about how safe is it there. And Niels Provost did a great job walking through the different kinds of threats. And what was interesting, he shared on 8-layer, it got really complicated, from hardware, the boot sequence, the OS and IPC sequence on the machine, to storage, the application, deployment, operations, and ultimately usage, how Google secures their own offerings, and then overlaid that in detail enough to put that probably in my blog to show both of them how that works for customers' Google Cloud Platform, because there needs to be more extensibility, right? It needs to become built to put foreign keys on there, different ways to secure the application, access to a firewall, many other aspects, and that's really well done by Niels in that presentation, which normally is boring. Then we came up to one of the stars of the container world, Eric Brewer, who's also a professor over at Berkeley on the other side of the Bay Area. So it was a little bit theoretical, historical. I personally enjoyed going back to it. And he was talking about the rise of cloud native computing, and largely, of course, that means doing things more about containers, in the Google sense, doing things more with Kubernetes. And the interesting thing is the deployment aspect of that, and we went through all the pieces of making the deployment infrastructure more declarative and understandable and abstracted more, culminating in what is the announcement was going to go on GitHub. Google's Project Helm is an OSS type manager, which is beyond what Google Cloud Platform does, but supports the package manager model of Kubernetes in general. So significant gift provision to the open source platform and to the world part. Then in the afternoon, we had the chance to listen to 3 of the key marquee customers which are there. Disney wasn't there, but instead of that, Snapchat came on there. We know that all too. So talk to Snapchat, Spotify, and Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola being the closest to the typical enterprise out there, with the CTO being present. Very interesting part. I asked them what is the number one thing they would like to see Google addressed. If they had a wish free, do right away. Spotify's feedback was they want to do things around access, around IAM, which Google's already doing, but they want more of that. On the Coca-Cola side, more support, no surprise from the enterprise, for third-party products in Google Cloud, and for better SI support, which is equally a typical requirement, because enterprise don't have the skills like Spotify or like Snapchat, which have their own engineers doing all these new, interesting, important things. So interesting perspective, no surprising feedback from that perspective. On the Snapchat side, on Spotify side, sorry, it was really also an interesting requirement to have an easier way to manage large sites of machine pools for different purposes. The person from Spotify here, Kurt Dadamo was last name for sure, was all about a big data use case where you want to provision storage and other pieces on large scale and manage them, right? So more managed machine pools was basic feedback. And then interesting, Spotify came back, Mr. Toad talking about a better lead on privacy, which was surprising to me to a certain point, because there's always this concern about Google privacy, will they violate it or not, Google being chased by many of the oversight pieces, the right to be forgotten in Europe and similar things as an example. But the interesting part here is that he seemed to be being at Spotify under pressure and would like to see Google to do more of a lead on data privacy, which is an interesting feedback. It's always good to listen to customers and hear that. That's pretty much from recap what was there. We still are going to see to a partner panel, which I will circumvent from this part. So what's my point of view here? So it's really interesting to see what Google is doing. There's tremendous interesting things around the use case that Google does by itself, store humongous amount of data, process them really fast, use machine learning. I think the adaptable machine learning around TensorFlow is a very interesting offering, making it easier for enterprises to consume that, making it easier to share and have it more automatically run, moving the bar for using data analytics or machine learning away from just the data scientist, advanced person, to maybe a more technical person who just knows the data but nothing about predictive analytics or machine learning, to potentially even a technical savvy business user, something very powerful and something very attractive. So attractive that pretty much was clear between the lines that attracted Spotify to move to Google Cloud Platform beyond what they were doing by themselves, or potentially with AWS, which we'll never really know what was going on there. So very interesting offerings. The key question is, two concerns, right? Will Google want to be in the business? And Diane Green was very clear on that yesterday. They want to get everything that the enterprise does, but right now what we see, the interesting things that Google is showing to us in every aspect are the things that Google by itself is very good at and has developed by itself to be very good at. We see that for every aspect, right? There's new visualization on Google Analytics, and the visualization is also in Data Center 360, which we saw yesterday. Look at the video there at my Storyfy collection there. So the question is, can Google build things which are in the enterprise, which are not a core competency for Google? Can they strengthen, for instance, their storage offering? Can they strengthen their high availability offering? Can they take non-Google loads, right? And the answer there yesterday was mixed. It was more about building new application for the 21st century, which certainly is a very good point. But the enterprise has much, much more and potentially want to move it. So can Google be a candidate for lift and shift? The answer right now seems to be no. Can they capture enough cloud load to be competitive with the Amazons, with the Azures who are more into that business, trying to get more in that business? It's going to be interesting to see in the next quarters. But overall, I think a very good event for Google. It's good to see that they're lobbying more, reaching out more. A very good start with the first Google Cloud Platform event. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, this went way too long. Appreciate it. Look forward to the blog. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.